Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I am hanging out with my friend Juanita to talk about the process of becoming a professional astrologer. We're going to talk about some advice and tips for becoming a professional astrologer and taking that leap, or how to build a practice. Juanita went through my some of my programs previously and has also been studying astrology in a variety of different contexts for a while, and brings a unique perspective on what it is like to take the leap from a full-time job into full-time astrology work, which is obviously is a full-time job of its own, but there's a lot of fear and hesitation that people have in diving into full-time astrology. So I thought this would make for a really good interview. And Juanita is always up to really interesting things, and I think has some really cool things going on right now that you might also be interested in. So Juanita, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Achuta.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe just start by telling people a little bit. Maybe you could just tell people a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in astrology. Yeah, let's just start there.
Yeah, well, I am currently an astrologer and tarot reader living in central Mexico. I do astrology and tarot full time, but it took me a long time to get here. And a lot of that had to do with confidence in being able to work with people and their charts. I've always been interested in astrology from being a little kid, then a teenager who just read a lot of books, not only astrology, but spirituality and religion. And then that just kind of segued into having a family, having a career, and just always keeping astrology on the back burner. And throughout the years I studied, kind of on and off, I had a teacher at one point, and it was just always, like a love affair from afar, like somebody that you can't have. That was astrology for me. And then I was going through a really shaky time in my career. And for some reason, I saw a chuta, and I thought, I think I'm really ready to take this seriously because doors were closing in terms of my other work. I was a academic reference librarian, and that closed for me. So then I went forward and I started studying in a one-on-one apprenticeship with a chuta, and that really gave me the confidence to go pro.
Yeah, I mean, I think your story is so interesting because I remember I don't actually offer my one-on-one apprenticeships anymore because of how busy I've gotten. But you were actually one of my last apprentices that I took, and after doing it for like 7 or 8 years, and I remember when you came in, you were working at a library at a school, right? Or where was it?
Yeah, I was working at a university, and this one was an online university in San Diego, based out of San Diego. And I was really done with librarianship. I'd worked as a children's librarian, a research librarian in different settings. And after having a really consistent track record, it just everything started closing, and I was getting laid off, and it just really terrible job insecurity. And so I remember reaching out to you because there was something about your style that I really resonated with. And we also have a shared background in ayahuasca. And because of those two things, I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to really commit to studying and see where this takes me, because it's been calling me for so long, but I was always afraid that I couldn't make a living from it. And if we take that to astrology, I would pin that on my Jupiter in Cancer, which really needs a lot of security to pay the bills and put the roof over the head.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, thanks for the plug. I'm really glad to hear that, something about my work clicked with you, and also with, with others, that my programs and my work have clicked, and that I've been able to, because of that, I've been able to do astrology as a professional as well. And that's, if you love doing it, there's nothing better than actually being able to do it. And I found at the beginning that that's what I cared about more than making any set amount of money or anything. In fact, I'd say my first 5 years as an astrologer were really kind of a grind of just getting experience, and just and it still is for me purely about the love of astrology. But yeah, to take the plunge from the world of, like, full-time jobs and sort of recognized traditional jobs to doing something like astrology full time. I think you have to sort of really love it and throw caution to the wind at some point. But maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how you set yourself up to be successful in doing that. I mean, I know that studying and getting more education and experience with me and through a lot of your own research. I mean, if you're a research librarian, you have the skills to also probably be a good student and know where to find good resources in general. So I think I'm sure that your astrological education has really gone beyond just my programs. But how do you go from that? And because I think a lot of people need to hear, the reason I'm doing this series, in fact, on how to develop a professional astrology business, is so that people who have done it can tell others about it, and people who haven't done it but are thinking of doing it can hear about how people have done it, because there's not just one approach. But how did you set yourself up to be successful? How did you start building this? And maybe you could take us into how the transition happened a little bit more specifically.
Yeah, so I think the biggest transition was my mind space. I had to really get over the fear of not making enough money to live. So it was working with my mind, working with those ideas, and then really coming down to the conclusion that you're only allotted a certain number of years in your life, and you can either do what you're really passionate about or not. And I knew that the right choice for me was to commit to my passion. You have to really love it. If you don't really love it, you won't be able to wait through and have patience and faith during the dry times, because it can be feast or famine. So you just have to go into it knowing, okay, it's not going to be steady, but if I plug away at it over time in a very Saturnian way, over time it pays off. Slowly but surely, you build your clientele. So for me, the way I put my mind around it was that I invested in myself when I went to school. You know, when you go to college or university or grad school, you put those years aside. And even though you might be working, you're still investing in your future. And I thought to myself, that's the way I'm going to approach this. I'm going to give myself a certain amount of time. And in my case, it was 2 years to either make it or break it. And if I didn't make it, I could always come back and do my old job. So for those 2 years, and continuing up to now, I moved to some place where my cost of living was much less expensive than it had been in Southern California. And so I cut my cost of living into 1/5 of what I used to need. So that was one thing, just simplify my living.
Mhm.
And then from there, I just started getting getting involved in Patreon, supporting other astrologers, building a community. Another thing was to start a meetup group in the town that I live. And it didn't get, much traction under it, but a few people started coming, and then COVID came and everything shut down. So that was another thing. And then just really doing a good job with clients, because I found for myself, at least, it's word of mouth
Mhm.
that's getting the most traction for me. I'm not great on social media. I don't have a brand. That's not where I excel. It's really giving good service so that these people will want to come back, and so they'll tell their friends. And so far, that's been what's been working for me, as well as stepping out a little bit of what I have to offer in terms of astrology, which leads to the Kickstarter project I'm doing now, and also magical talismans.
Right. So you've ended up grafting several other kind of offerings into your astrology offering, which is pretty common. Like I know a huge amount of astrologers who also do tarot readings, or they might have a particular intuitive skill, or they might be a therapist, or they might be a yoga teacher, or so I think that's another thing to mention, is that astrology is often paired with other gifts or abilities that people have and develop. But I want to go back to one thing that you said, which is that you have to be it's like setting a reasonable goal. Okay, I'm going to give myself a certain amount of time to do this and build this. And it can look different. I've seen people who work part-time while they're doing that. They give themselves 2 or 3 years, but they're going to work part-time to like they're going to but it's it the part that you mentioned about reducing your cost of living so that you could do what you love. That's hugely important. It's not available for everyone because they're in life situations that may not allow for that, right? Or they don't have a backup skill necessarily like you did, or whatever the case might be. But for example, in my first year of doing astrology, when I first started doing astrology, I was collecting unemployment because I was working at a yoga studio that I'd been served the eviction notice at the front desk. And so I was on unemployment. I started doing work by donation just to gather experience. And so my fees were really low. But because I was doing it by donation, I did have a presence on social media, so it's a little bit different. But it was word of mouth. I never paid. In 10 years, I've paid very, very little in advertising ever. Probably over 10 years, less than $10,000. Like, and probably most years, none at all. But there's been some targeted ads I've done here and there for certain things. But the word of mouth as a reader is hugely important, as is the need to give yourself a lot of time to let that word of mouth grow. And you also, during that time, have to put yourself out there and get into communities and groups where astrologers are hanging out so that you can essentially circulate your name and your work to other people as well. And then it just starts to build. But you really do have to be very patient for the process and very realistic about how long it's going to take. I really appreciate that, because so many times people will want to take my programs and they'll say, will I become an astrologer afterward? And I'm like, you'll be able to read charts. You'll have the skills necessary if you really love astrology. That's the caveat. If you really love it, to do it, but you're going to have to build a practice, and that takes a while, and you have to be really realistic about that and have a game plan for it.
Yeah, I agree. And, I started working with people on their charts back in 2008. So that, the leap of faith had some background behind it. It wasn't just walking away and quitting and saying, I'm going to start this now. There was really, in the background, there had been a gradual buildup to embracing astrology full time. And I think the reason it took me so long to cross that line and to go full time is the confidence. I'm a slow learner. It takes me a long time to digest when I'm learning things. And so it took me a while. It took me a lot of reading. It took me a lot of time with people's charts. It took me working with you, Acyuta, to eventually say, I've got the goods. I've been doing this long enough to really trust that I have something to offer people, because I take it so seriously, and I really want the person that I'm meeting with to walk away feeling seen and empowered. So I think confidence for some people, if you maybe are an introvert, or you just for whatever reason that confidence isn't there, sometimes that takes a long time to build too. So as you're working or having some kind of job, whether it's full-time or part-time, see people, look at their charts, talk to them about it before there's pressure to make a living from doing that.
Right, right. That's so important. Um, that, that willingness to put yourself out there and get experience, it requires confidence in the beginning that, like, I don't have to be a masterful astrologer to sit down and try to read someone's chart, because there really is no way to become a masterful astrologer until you start at one point reading a person's chart, having never done so before. So that's the other thing, is that I think when you study astrology, along the way, wherever you are at, it's not a crime, it's not a sin. There is no central astrology authority agency that says you can or cannot read a chart for people. Obviously, it helps to get some ideas about how to structure a reading, knowing and understanding what the goal or purpose of astrology is personally, and what you're trying to provide your clients with, kind of getting clear about those intentions, learning how to hold space for people and to have humility as a reader. But a lot of that is, as long as you have that kind of the good-hearted intention to help people, and you're not in it to impress or build up your ego, and you're more concerned about the client and getting it right, which I think most people have those qualities. They have that what I just call like a gentleness of spirit that wants to help. You're qualified once you've been studying for a while, if you've been studying astrology for a few years and you absorb a lot of it, and you can look at charts without someone there, then you can probably have a conversation with someone that is there. And at a certain point, if you keep building those kinds of experiences, there's going to come a time where you might be ready to take that leap. And if you have a plan around you for doing it, it can really work. And that seems to be how it works. Watching a lot of students over time, that seems to be how it works for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you've been practicing now full time for what, like 2 years, year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah, almost 2.5.
Oh, 2.5. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So
time goes by really fast.
yeah. Yeah. And how has this time been for you? Like, what are some of the tips that you would give people as they're diving into reading charts, whether they're doing it full time or even just starting part time, to make that shift and to take it a lot more seriously? What are some of the things that you've learned or noticed about the past couple of years?
Well, like I said before, you have to really want it. You have to really love it, because I know that for myself, I went from working 8-hour days to 10, 12-hour days, whether it's working with clients or preparing or writing a newsletter or engaging with other astrologers or increasing your knowledge. There's always something. There's more and there's more to do. And so if you love it, it makes it something that you want to do. So a few things that I've done, for instance, is I keep learning. I take classes, I audit classes, I'm reading books, I'm constantly trying to learn more about the things that I'm interested in astrology. And also joining a group or two so that you have community, so that you can talk with other astrologers. For instance, I'm in a small horary group, and we look at charts and we look at the horary behind them, and we kind of, what do you think about this? And what about this? And it's really nice to have kind of a group of kindred spirits that you can talk about astrology with. So that's another thing. And then just being realistic, I guess, about, what's coming in and what's going out and what's sustainable, not only in terms of income, but your time and your energy and how much you can do. Because I know that for myself, if I don't take a break and if I don't rest and take a day off, for instance, then you burn out really quickly. So it's just thinking about all these things. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else to add here. I think that's it.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. And I want to ask, you took my personal apprenticeship. I'm not doing my personal apprenticeships anymore, but maybe through my course and through any other courses that have been meaningful for you, what should people like? What are the things that you took away from my class or from teachers and classes that have been really impactful, so that other people could have some advice as to what to look for, or what to look for in their own training or programs that they might be looking at. And I want to say, obviously, I'm excited for Juanita to plug my program, but in general, what should we look for, Juanita, in studying? Because I've studied with multiple teachers, you've studied in multiple settings. What was the good stuff that you got out of my program? And more generally, what are the good things for people to look for in training programs?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing that I took away from your program was watching you work with people. So when you don't have that experience, when you haven't, worked one-on-one with people and seen how they open up, or what tools, strategies you can use to ask them questions about their own lived experience, it really helps to see somebody do that. What are the phrases that they use? When's a comfortable time to ask about things? And so it was really helpful for me just to observe you giving somebody a consultation and seeing how you work with sensitive topics, for instance. And then afterwards, after that session was done, to then go back and talk about it and break down things that you said and things that you didn't say, because there's oftentimes you don't say things because maybe it's not appropriate. And when you're brand new to astrology, you don't always know where that line is. So that was the thing that I really liked, was watching that. I think also that it helps to have some kind of rapport with your teacher. You, for some reason, you want to work with them. There's some sort of magnetism there. And I've had that with you. I've had that with Nina Griffin, who I
She's
studied,
great.
yeah, magical elections with. And so you find a teacher that just speaks your language. For some reason, you really vibe with them. So it makes it a joy to sit in on their classes as well. That's another thing to look for in a teacher, I think. And then another thing is, what kind of astrology are you interested in? Are you interested in traditional, evolutionary, a mix? There's so many kinds of astrology. So knowing what you want to practice or what you want to learn more of, and then look at your teacher and see if that's the kind of astrology that they're teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the beginning, when I was first studying, it was just sort of like just getting as much information as I could, and then gradually being like, oh, okay, so there's these different schools, there's different teachers. But at some point, if you want to go deep, it's like you can't dig a bunch of shallow holes. You got to dig straight down to hit the water and find a well. And I think that for a lot of people, that means honing in on, okay, that this is the type of astrology, or maybe a blend of two types, or these are the type of astrology I want to say. There's a few teachers I really like taking their classes. And in that way, you start refining your own voice and your own methods and approaches. And I think that's really good advice. Certainly, that's how it's been for me and the teachers that that I chose. I think that the number one thing that I pride myself in on terms of the programs that I've created is the opportunity for students to see a lot of live readings done, because the number one thing that I felt that I didn't get from even the greatest teachers that I feel like I've had, and I'm not at all insulting them by saying this, but there wasn't like, let me bring you into my, my workshop and let me show you how I work with people. Because that experience, I never had that. I never even knew what an astrology reading looked like. I ended up buying a lot of readings so I could experience what it was like to have my chart read and see how astrologers read, more than I really cared about getting my own chart read. So I was reflecting on that and thought, no, this really needs to happen, where there needs to be like in, I was in an MFA program, and we would read each other's work and then break down craft elements of the work. And I know that some organizations, I know OPA does that now, where they have these breakout groups where someone reads for someone else and then you get commentary from other astrologers. I think that more things like that coming forth in the astrological world, are nothing but helpful. And so I'm really glad to hear that that was a piece of the program you liked, because that particular piece is the one thing that I never felt like I was getting enough of. So yeah, if I can be helpful so people don't have to feel totally in the dark like I felt like I was for years, until you can learn by experience. I think that people can figure it out without necessarily having to read exactly like someone else does, or seeing a million chart readings or something like that. But it really helps to have a few examples in front of you, I think.
Yeah, I think that was the main thing that I was attracted to. And the only other way that you can get that experience from, that's live, is to have your chart done by a professional astrologer. And that gets to be pretty expensive.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
exactly.
but that's also something that I would recommend, is if you can, once a year, go to somebody and see their style, and you learn so much on what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, and yeah, I certainly was never trying to spy on other astrologers, but when I feel like getting a reading from Demetra George, getting a reading from Stephen Forrest, getting, all these different readings that I had, I picked up so many good things. And then there was other things where I was like, oh, I didn't, that wasn't me, or that's not going to be my style. And it wasn't, but I can honestly say that I haven't had like a reading that I would consider really bad. And I think that's interesting, given that probably most astrologers out there right now, came up having to just get experience and chop wood and carry water. I mean, I don't know one astrologer who didn't just chop wood and carry water, doing lots of charts and just loving astrology, and word of mouth, their practice grew. So that's kind of how it happens. And there's a lot of really good astrologers out there who built their way just through trying it, just putting themselves out there and trying to read charts. Of course, there's some people who have therapeutic training, and I'm certainly not talking about posing as though we are therapists or counselors. I'm just talking about reading people's birth charts. Well, this has been really helpful, but I want to, before we end for today, I want to turn the attention to what you're up to now. You have some really interesting projects going on right now, and maybe we could talk a little bit about what they are. You also you have a Kickstarter going on right now as well, so maybe we could talk about that too.
Yeah. So two things. I'm working with planetary magic, and I created a sun talisman, and now I'm in the process of creating a Saturn one. So that's something I'm really excited about. The thing also that I'm very excited about is a tarot deck for children. I met a wonderful illustrator here in San Miguel de Allende, where I live, which is a central town in central Mexico. And she was a children's illustrator, and I have the tarot background because since day one, I've worked with tarot and astrology, both of those. And we just used to meet while our dogs played. And we ended up just thinking of, well, why don't we do a children's deck? There's not one that we know of. And so that's what we've been working on since May. And December 19th, we launched it on Kickstarter, and it's really different and unique from other tarot decks out there. It's not just for children, but it's written in a way that uses examples that children will understand. And I like to say it's like Pema Chodron for children. So it's really kind and compassionate tarot. Um,
See
yeah,
if you can bring it. I'm trying to bring one up right now as you're speaking. Let's see. There we go. There's Temperance.
there's Temperance.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, we chose an octopus because it's a water animal, and children are so connected to their emotions. Um, and temperance is about taking in all the experiences that you have and just continually saying yes to life in a very Sagittarius way. Part is ruled by Sag, and you can see that there's like a little Sag uh, emblem.
Symbol right there. Yeah.
Yeah, the symbol. And so there's a lot of symbolism that we've taken from Rider Waite, which is a very traditional deck that a lot of people know. And we've put it here in our deck, but then we've expanded some of the symbolism too, to take, for instance, the animal ambassadors of every card really fit the vibe of that card.
Right. So let me see if I can bring up another one. Hold on. Let me just, I got to pull up the link again. I lost it. Yeah. So I love this idea as a parent, who's my kids are already interested. They're like, okay, well, my daughter is already interested in astrology. She's been asking me about it, what is it and so forth. And, for a parent, I feel like this would be a great way to, if you're out there, you love astrology and you're not afraid to show your kids about the things that you love as they grow up. Well, here's a totally great way of doing it. I've got one right here. Yeah, here's a nice one. Looks like it's the Two of Cups. So let's see. Can you see that?
Yeah, so the minor arcana, that's the cups and the swords, the pentacles and the wands. Each one of those is represented by a different animal. So in the cups, we have the story of two goldfish. Cups in tarot are about emotional intelligence, our feelings. And here, one goldfish gets introduced into the goldfish tank, and the story of the cups is their story in the fish tank.
That's so sweet.
So, yeah. So all the minors have a story. And here we have like domestic animals, things that we might have as pets. And all the major arcana are in the wild. They're really kind of majestic looking creatures.
See if we can find one here. There's the tower. Look at this one. This is
That's
beautiful.
an awesome one.
Look at that one.
The tower, I used to work at a Buddhist meditation retreat center in the California redwoods, off grid in the forest, and all these animals were around my cabin all the time, including vulture. And I learned to love the vulture. I'd be going on my hikes and they'd be like pecking away at a carcass. And they're the janitors of the forest. They
Yeah.
keep things clean. I mean, we owe a lot to them for what they do. When we're
Wow.
in the
Beautiful.
tower, we're experiencing some sort of like big change that kind of uproots us from our status quo life. And so we use the vulture here to say we're just cleaning up.
Hmm.
We're going through this so that we can start anew in a different way.
Beautiful. Absolutely brilliant. We're going to put, so you're, and right now you're raising money through a Kickstarter to build this tarot deck for children. Is that right?
Yeah, we are raising money. We're raising 22,000, and right now we're a little bit over 13,000.
Great.
Started
Needs
on.
some, need some help to push across the finish line.
We do. Yeah, this idea came to us. We didn't think of it on our own. We're just the collaborators with an idea that wants to present itself in this time, which
Mhm.
is a compassionate, kind deck for kids. And if you can think of your own daughters, like let's say one of them uh, just is really poopy. She's super upset about something, and you tell her, why don't you pull a card and we can look at what these feelings are trying to tell you. I mean, this is one way that you can work with the tarot for children.
So, and I want to ask because I'm going to go on to your Kickstarter page and make my donation this afternoon. And when I do so, I'm wondering if there's any rewards. Like, could I, when I donate, is it possible to get a copy of the deck if I donate enough?
Yeah, that's what our Kickstarter is all about. Our Kickstarter is raising enough money so we can move these from the digital realm into the physical realm. So one of the tiers is a deck, and then it goes up. You can get like a deck and stickers, a deck and a tote bag, a deck and other things. So yeah, there's like I think 6 different choices
Okay,
that you
cool.
can choose. And then let's say you do get a deck and your girls are super excited about it. If we're successful, you'll be able to add on things at the end of the campaign.
Cool. Yeah, here it is right here. You can go
There-
and I'll just scroll up. We'll put the link into the comment section of this post in the description of this post. So you can go on and pick up a deck for yourself, for your kids. I'm definitely getting this for my girls. Of course, I may have to order two because my daughters are, they may kill each other. But anyway, this looks so cool. I'm so glad to see. The other thing I want to actually, we should mention this really briefly, um, Juanita, which is that a lot of astrologers, in order to be successful, will have a social media presence of some kind, will create content in addition to doing readings or teaching classes, and will find a way to monetize their content through something like Patreon or an annual Kickstarter. When I started, I don't think Patreon was around when I started my Kickstarter. And a lot of astrologers use Patreon, but for whatever reason, I really like the 40-day fundraiser tradition that I started. So I've just stuck with it. But that's another way that I think, we're going to have more guests on in this series on professional astrology. And a lot of people have taken that path of, putting content out there and then basically getting their subscribers to support them because they value the content. So one question that I have for you is your Kickstarter is doing really well, but you said that you don't really have this big, you haven't focused on developing a big social media platform. So how have you found success in raising support for something like this so far, if that's not been your focus?
Yeah, well, it's me and my partner Nicola, who's the children's illustrator. She's got more of a social media presence than I do on the illustration side. We
Got it.
started a Fauna Beltero Instagram, and it's been growing. And then I have a newsletter. And I've been writing every single person I possibly can to see if they'd be interested in promoting the deck. And again, it's not about me and it's not about Nicola. It's about this thing that wants to exist in the world, which is tarot for kids. So when I'm writing on Fauna Beltero's behalf, I'm just really inspired, and I hope that comes across in the writing for other people to promote us.
Absolutely. So check out, I want to say it right, Fauna Beltero on Instagram.
Yeah, Fauna Beltero, all one word, on Instagram.
We'll put that in the description if you're looking for it. And then the Kickstarter link will be there. And then what is your website?
JuanitasBenedicto.com. Yeah, and on the Instagram, you can go in and kind of read like why we chose the animals and what their upright and reversal meanings are.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so on JuanitaBenedicto.com, people can also book readings with you.
Yeah, you can book a reading. I have 2 more sun talismans left. I'm going to be making a Saturn one in April. And yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, it's been my pleasure to have you here today and to not only tell people what you're up to and kind of help promote. One of the other reasons that I'm doing this series is I want to show my audience. Many people approach me and say, what kind of students are coming out of your programs? What are they doing? And so this is also a time for me to showcase, like, hey, look at what these cool people are doing, right? So, but also to talk shop and to talk about each individual's journey with becoming a professional astrologer and what kind of advice or tips that we have for people. So this idea actually came up through conversation with Juanita. We were talking about her work, and this was something that you said, it would be cool if you showcased you have a lot of students that are doing really interesting things, and wouldn't it be cool if you did a series where you talked about professional astrology and also showcase some of what your students were doing. And it was not the first time that idea had come up, but for whatever reason, it just felt like the right time to start doing it, especially as my programs have gotten a lot bigger and more that maybe the top question I get from people is like, could you point me to some of your previous students and what they're doing? And so be able to do that, like I said, talk business about how to do all of this has been a really nice treat for today. So Juanita, thank you so much for being here and for having this conversation. Hopefully we'll stay in touch and do something again down the road. And as always, I tell all my students this, but however I can continue to be a resource for you, it's really important that we do that for each other. So, the people that we teach or we see as clients, a lot of them are students of astrology, and it's really good to create more community resources and support for one another.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that I so appreciate you, Achyuta, because I feel like astrology comes from lineage. You have your teacher, and then you embody and you pass it down. And I've been so thankful that every single time that I've emailed you, even when it was, should I change my URL to something else because I don't fit this anymore? Even questions like that, you were always so thoughtful in your responses and in getting back to me in a timely manner. So it's not like I had a student teacher relationship with you that started and ended. No, I really feel like it's a lineage, and that you're still sort of mentoring me in a way, and that's great.
Absolutely. And I have no doubt that you're going to do that for all of the people that you're seeing and working with too. And my best teachers did that for me. So I think that we may not have pure lineages like they do in India or the ancient world, but we can create our own in this day and age. And so, yeah, that's really important. Well, thank you again, Juanita, for being here. Everybody, thank you for watching. Remember, look in the comment section. You can pick up that children's tarot deck, support Juanita in her work, check out her readings as well. And hopefully we'll do more of these coming up soon. I have a few more guests slated to come in and talk about how to cultivate an astrology practice. And if you have questions for us about this that you'd like to see answered in this series, please email me info@nightlightastrology.com and put YouTube question in the subject line. All right, that's what we've got for today. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.